There we go. Bonjour, mes amis. It is delightful to be here with you this evening. I have two wonderful speakers, and we're going to be diving deeply into hydrogen, water, all that is fad, all that is science, and all that is hype. And we're going to be trying to discern the waters that sit around this. Oh, pun intended. And really explore what is hydrogen water exactly? Does it have health benefit? Is science backing up that health benefit? And is it worth your dollar bills in support of your health? As you can imagine, there are many companies right now. Why part in part this is so popular is there's so many companies offering different products, be that tablets, be that machines, be that water bottles. Um, and so we're going to be product agnostic this evening. So we're not going to be answering questions very specific to products. So if you ask us a question, is product X better than products Y? We're not going to be addressing that. We will speak to hydrogen water. We're going to speak to tablets and machines and bottles, but we're not going to be endorsing or tearing down any of the products. So, just as a reminder of that, if you do have any questions for us throughout the show, we're going to make sure we reserve a lot of time for questions and answers because this is such a filled topic. So, please use the question and answer box as well as the chat because we love hearing from you. Now I'm going to be introducing my wonderful panelists. With me this evening, I have two certified functional genomic practitioners. I have Dr. Lara Varden and Justin Harris. Welcome, guys. How are you? There we are.
Good. Good to be
Hello
here.
and good
Nice to
evening.
see everybody once again.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to diving into this with you today because I think as we were preparing for this audience, across the three of us, there's three different kind of points of the spectrum that we sit on between the sides of fad to savior, and we're really going to explore. Oh, someone just said my audio had been cut out. You guys can hear me okay, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yep. Okay, perfect. Um, we're going to be exploring what that is. So, before we jump into this question of fad and all that other fun stuff, um, Justin, perhaps why don't you walk me through what exactly is hydrogen water and what are some of the proposed benefits there?
Right. So hydrogen water and the proposed benefits, the keyword there being proposed, right? Because we're
Mhm.
going to stay relatively agnostic on the spectrum of this here, is that it is basically something that activates a particular pathway that has a lot of specificity towards the mitochondria. So there's a pathway that's called NRF2 that it exists in the body. And it really helps to regulate this idea of pro versus antioxidative action in the body. There used to be a thing called the free radical theory of aging, which is that, when our body has a lot of free radicals, that really accelerates the aging of the cells. Now we talk a little bit more about something called redox homeostasis. So there's reduction and there's oxidation. And these are actually two kind of dichotomies that exist within our cells to balance pro versus antioxidative effects. So believe it or not, you can have too many antioxidants in your body and you can have too much oxidative stress as well. So much
Mm.
of life has to do with this electron exchange that goes on at a cellular level. Antioxidants, they don't just go in and neutralize free radicals just because of what they are. What they do is they lend an electron to the free radical and it balances it back out so that it's not able to steal electrons from other molecules and therefore create additional oxidative stress. So the NRF2 pathway is a really important regulator of phase 2 detoxification, and hydrogen water is touted to activate the NRF2 pathway. So you can get it in a lot of different forms. There's the tablets that you mentioned. There's the water bottles. There's machines. There's actually bath bombs, and you can inhale it. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you can take in
Mhm.
hydrogen,
Yeah.
but it's mainly that it's helping to regulate that particular pathway. That's among the touted benefits.
Okay. Okay. And Dr. Varden, what are the claims that you're hearing be made about this? And so health claims. So for example, if you drink so much hydrogen water per day per week, whatever the measure might be, it is going to fix or cure X, Y, and Z. What are some of the spaces that hydrogen water is being put up against and claimed benefit for?
Well, a lot of it comes down to inflammation.
Okay.
That because it is being claimed as being a major antioxidant, that
Mhm.
and helps with reducing the oxidative stress. Well, oxidative stress can lead to inflammation. And inflammation, which we've spoken about many times on many other webinars, is a foundational issue to
Mm.
the majority of chronic conditions. And so when we're talking about health problems, that inflammation is a
Mm.
foundation is cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, heart disease, you know, all of these different things. Now, obviously, those are more end stage issues, but
Yeah.
these are the types of problems, pain points that marketing
Mhm.
and, you know, other these products are saying or claiming that they can affect. So,
Mm.
you know, I'm jumping to that end, but really
Yeah.
it comes down to how it affects inflammation and what Justin so beautifully explained and how that works in the mitochondria and reactive oxygen species and that oxidative stress.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay. Okay. So anything really where inflammation is involved with, but to that end, we kind of see it within cardiometabolic. So obesity and diabetes sort of pictures. We see it in energy pictures if you're fatigued. And then kind of the more severe diseases insofar as either a chronic illness, a chronic infection, or perhaps a cancer, something along those lines. That's kind of where we're hearing it.
Yeah. Well, we're also hearing it, and are also studies when it comes to optimization for athletes.
Mm, mhm, mhm.
Again, because it helps to, or the claim
Yeah.
of it helping to lower that oxidative stress that happens, you know, in the muscles, in the cells, you know, these tissues when someone is working out and exercising at that level, you know, that elite level, or, you know, something more than the average person doing
Okay.
exercise.
Okay. Okay. And to confirm my understanding and to support the audience's understanding, Justin, walk me through this in that if someone wants to be taking hydrogen water, they are what's kind of the process there? How does water from the tap or your filter, however you get your water, then be transformed into this? What's happening there?
Yeah, so typically, I mean, with the actual tablets, what's happening is they have a really special form of magnesium. It's like an elemental kind of ionized form of magnesium, and they're really compressed into these tablets. So you basically drop them into the water, and then the water actually interacts with the tablet. It does nothing to the
Mhm.
structure of the water, right? So I think that
Mhm.
there's a misconception about that, that it changes, oh, the pH or the structure of the water. The water is simply a delivery mechanism for the molecular hydrogen. So in the water, it's the tablet and the magnesium form that actually changes and turns into a gas, right? And hydrogen is it's on the periodic table. It's actually the first thing on the periodic table, right? So it's a primordial molecule. The sun needs it, the stars need it. It's been something that interacts with our biology since our inception and before that, right? So it's a very powerful molecule. I mean, we know that we can use it to blow up entire cities. We can also use it to drink and hopefully clear some free radicals, you know, in the body. But it's a very intense molecule, and it happens to be one of those ones that you can use in a lot of different forms. But the actual
Mhm.
gas, you have to drink it pretty quickly in these tablet forms, because otherwise the parts per million will just reduce by the
Mhm.
second if you don't time it right, because it's a gas, right? So it just
Okay.
evaporates right out of the water. But there's a chemical exchange going on that turns elemental magnesium into hydrogen gas.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So let's break out our glasses and dig into the science and research because I think when I view social media, there's a lot of claims that say like, "Hey, science says that," and it's this very general panacea sort of phrasing. So let's dig into the research and be very specific. Let's be specific in terms of who and what has been studied, and let's be specific in terms of what conditions have been studied and what shifts in end outcomes. Um, let's first start off with this idea of how much of the research in general is done on humans versus how much is on animal models. Because I think this is an important thing to tease out, right? We always hear there's thousands and thousands of studies, but proportionally, a lot of the studies are still in animal models. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
I
number that
mean,
I saw, sorry, Dr. K, the number I saw was that out of 1,300, that about 200 of them were in fact on humans. So that's
Mhm.
a pretty sizable thing to mention. And although I'm coming at this from a perspective of pro hydrogen water, I would say that I must be
Yeah.
absolutely honest about where the
Yeah.
state of the research is. I think I'm more fascinated by the direction of the research than how it's actually fully hashed out up to this point, if I'm being honest.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no. I think that's good and sound point. I want to explore that point too. Yeah.
yeah, and I want to give some reference to what Justin was talking about, that there actually is a site called hydrogenstudies.com. And on it, I mean, it does show that, 1,335 studies have been found, and you can actually filter them by, health topics, by all different, ways of looking at it. Um, and it covers not just hydrogen water, does hydrogen gas, it does all things with hydrogen.
Hmm.
So, but really interesting, to have a resource that is specifically about
Yeah.
hydrogen. But I mean, honestly, when you consider the millions of research studies that
Mm.
have been done, if you go to PubMed, not saying that there's millions on hydrogen, but of like all the studies that are done, 1,300 is just a little tiny blip in the ocean,
Hmm. Hmm.
of research studies.
Yeah.
But it's nice to see that it is gaining traction in research,
Hmm.
that we are exploring that even more to eventually get some robustness either way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so and often two times, like let's be plain, the course of science is we first study in animals and petri dishes to kind of confirm that something funky's going on there, and then we move into humans once we confirm it's safe and there's worthwhile investing time, dollars, et cetera, energy in it. So having a large portion of animal studies at this juncture is not a negative thing, and I think we need to be very clear about that. We
Mhm.
just also have to be mindful when we're extrapolating. So of the human studies, what's the lay of the land? Let's start off by saying, are there any studies that conclusively say hydrogen water, if you're drinking, an audience oftentimes in the studies, it's about 1.5 liters a day divided doses. But if you're drinking a prescribed amount, are there any studies that say it changes an outcome in a population?
Oh, there are.
Yeah,
Um,
so let's hear.
oh, absolutely. Okay. So there was actually a research study. Let me get my specific thing out. So this is original research that was done. Um, and let's see, this is it is open access by Dove Press in diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and obesity. And the title is The Effects of 24-Week High Concentration Hydrogen Rich Water on Body Composition, Blood Lipid Profiles, and Inflammation Biomarkers in Men and Women with Metabolic Syndrome. And it's a randomized controlled trial.
Hmm.
So we're not talking about elite athletes. We're not talking, this is, people with issues like, general, population type. And, with this, there were, actually, I just had closed some of this. Let's see. I believe there was 60
Hmm.
participants, and hang on. Oh, I closed something in here. Anyway, I'll kind of give some information from memory here as well. Again, 24-week long, they looked at different biomarkers. I remember that they had, again, around that liter uh,
Hmm.
of drink. And I do want to make sure that I give some
Yeah, so it's about 1.5 liters,
specific,
and it was, yeah,
right.
30 people each side. Yeah.
Right. Do you have some of that information? Because, like I said, mine
Yeah.
disappeared, and
No,
I don't want to
that's okay.
misspeak on this.
Yeah, it's okay. So audience, the study that Dr. Varden was referencing, and we discussed beforehand, this is her brainchild. Thank you very much for finding this. It was done on an Indian population divided into two groups, and they had effectively early pre-diabetes. They were overweight. And the question was, if nothing else changed, they didn't change diet or lifestyle, etc., would drinking about 1.5 liters of divided dose of hydrogen water per day change outcomes? And it did. The group that was drinking it, so the group that was not drinking placebo, the other group kind of got a tablet, and it probably was like an Alka-Seltzer of sorts, and that it fizzied the water, but no other benefit there, like a carbonated water. But the group did lose weight, and there was a modest improvement in certain cardiometabolic features. So there was a shift within this group. So it's a small study. It's only I don't mean to be dismissive. It's still 60 people, but it looked at, if you change nothing else over the course of 24 weeks, Dr. Varden?
Correct.
24 weeks, this population did see a shift. Yeah. Yeah. So no, thank you. That's a wonderful look there. Justin, I wonder if we can talk a little bit about high performance athletes, because I know this part is close to your heart as our resident athlete.
Yeah, well, when it comes to the piecing together of a toolkit, right? Like I strongly rely on that whole concept of moving from general to specific. I would consider the utilization of hydrogen to be on that pretty specific end of things, right? Like we were talking right before this, and it's like, you know, a certain amount of fiber and vegetable intake, your gut can actually produce hydrogen as well. So if you're one of these people that has a poor diet and you choose to add in hydrogen water and hoping that it's going to correct certain things in your body, that's probably not the first thing that you need to do, right? And this is one of those things that you would add on to other complementary protocols and lifestyle factors and things. The thing about athletes is that it's a constant struggle to keep your body in homeostasis.
Mm.
The sheer just nature of being a friggin' demolition derby car for a living. You know what I mean? Just beating your body up. Your joints are always beaten up. Your nervous system is always being pulled out of whack from just going into hard workout after hard workout. And we know that one of the main things is oxidative stress there, right? Like your mitochondria are placed under an extra demand to create more and more ATP to fuel your workouts. And the more ATP that your mitochondria create, there's also more free radicals being created at the same time. So that's where I think things like, molecular hydrogen can be of use for people that have added demand on their body and therefore added free radicals in the mitochondria as well. One of the cool things about some of the studies I've looked at, and again, we've already hashed out some of these studies are non-conclusive. A lot of them were in animal models, but one of the kind of cool aspects of it is that hydrogen seems to not necessarily act the same way in the same person all the time.
Mm.
It's more situational. So, like I mentioned, it's not just an antioxidant, it appears to be more of a modulator of
Mm.
antioxidant systems in the body. So, there's certain circumstances where they've looked at autophagy, for example. We all want autophagy. Autophagy is a good thing. There was certain circumstances where hydrogen actually helped to increase autophagy. There was other circumstances where it suppressed autophagy, because too much autophagy can also kick you out of homeostasis. It can cause you damage, right? So some of the studies would suggest that it can actually help to pull you back into a state of homeostasis, no matter what edge of the spectrum you're on. And athletes are always trying to pull themselves back into that center line. The only real anecdotal evidence that I have as an athlete is that I do have a suboptimal SOD2 pathway. If you're kind of new to these webinars, I've talked about it before, but effectively superoxide dismutase is a pathway that we look at for clearing free radicals from the mitochondria. If you've got T alleles, and I'm a TT, that means that you've got a lot of reduction in the SOD2 pathway, and you're not going to clear free radicals very well. So when that's the case, it's not a good idea to be an athlete, right? Because you're going to be creating so many extra reactive oxygen species and not clearing them properly. So I have poor SOD2. I'm also an athlete. And yet the markers associated with oxidative stress are actually abnormally low for me. So that would suggest that something about my protocol is absolutely working. And I will say, I used to have to take long recovery times between workouts. At age 18, I actually had to take longer to recover than now at age 33. I do a lot of other things, but
Mm.
hydrogen is one of the things that I use on a daily basis. And I think it may be among those needle movers for kind of helping me to get my better recovery time, considering my genes are not working for me and nor is
Mm.
my lifestyle in accordance with my genes. So that's my little spiel about athletes and how I kind of look at the
Mm.
whole pathway.
Love it. Yeah, beautiful. Dr. Varden,
Yes.
do you want to go over the review that was done in 2024?
Absolutely. So
Mm.
there was a peer-reviewed system words. Here we go.
So close. So
Yeah.
close.
Systematic review. And the title of this review paper was Hydrogen Water, Extra Healthy or a Hoax? And there were several medical doctors who were part of this. It was published in the International Journal of Molecular Sciences in January of 2024. And really, the objective of this paper was looking at 30 human clinical studies to assess antioxidation, anti-inflammation, anti-apoptotic effects of hydrogen-rich water, and any potential applications in exercise performance, cardiovascular, liver function, mental health, aging, cancer, dialysis, and even COVID-19. So really covering a lot of those things that I had mentioned before that have inflammation, and oxidative stress as the basis. So really, when they were looking at this, they found many key findings, obviously sectioned out by health domains that I've already listed. And I know Justin has already been mentioning a lot of the, physical, athletic benefits. But when we're talking about things like cardiovascular health and COVID-19, kidney, mental health, but getting down to cancer. Now, when we're talking about things like cancer that was brought up before, that they were showing initially in animal and pilot studies, because again, they were looking at human, but that hydrogen-rich water enhanced effects of chemotherapy when they were,
Hmm.
as a supportive measure. And it helped to reduce tumor volume and fibrosis. And then there was another separate systemic review that showed hydrogen-rich water improved the quality of life and reduced tumor burden in various cancers. When we were talking about going back to cardiovascular health, because really, we're talking about something small molecularly, that it's not
Yeah.
just about the main cardiovascular pathway, but actually getting into the capillaries,
Hmm.
something very, very small and, working peripherally that, it was showing also with what we
Yeah.
mentioned earlier in the other paper, decreasing things like LDL cholesterol, triglycerides, ApoB,
Hmm.
increasing HDL function, improving vascular endothelial function,
Hmm.
that they did show, a different percentages,
Hmm.
over after a period of weeks of use. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of different areas that that has looked at this,
Mm.
at hydrogen rich water. But again, diving into each and every one, looking at the limitations, at the focus of
Hmm.
the particular study, all of these things make a difference, and we have to be very careful to just have blanket statements, because
Yeah.
this could make it sound like, oh, this is the panacea, that silver bullet that can fix everything. And we
Yeah.
have to be very careful in doing that and really start parceling out the specifics.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I think both you and Justin raise a good point. Like Justin was very specific to say you need to think about it in context of the person using it. So for example, he talked about in high performance athletes, there's some pretty sound work done in swimmers that says, what for recovery time, hydrogen water has supported that. And that's exactly what Justin uses it for. And I read a different study that looked at more casual athletes, so not high performers, kind of someone like me that every once in a while pretends like they exercise. And the benefits were not mirrored there, in part, because the physical fitness, the physical exertion, et cetera, just wasn't there. And the body wasn't kind of, to Justin's point, out of. And so I think there's an element of being so specific around the end point or the health measure that you're trying to support, because I think as much as Justin is on the pro yay side, and I think for good reason. I don't say that. I do not dismiss that, and I take that seriously. I'm a little bit more on the cautious side, and the reason I sit more on the cautious side is twofold. I think when something is marketed as this general thing that can fix everything, I see more sales and marketing than actually true benefit. So, for example, here's what I'd say: the Indian study that we referenced that looked at 60 people, and if they drank, a liter and a half of water a day, did that change outcomes? And it did for them. But I think of how much does that cost for a
Mhm.
quality machine? Remember, part of the biggest variability as to accessing hydrogen water is the variance in machines and tablets and whatever it might be, the quality of the product you're getting, right? And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But, let's say you're doing tablets and it's $2 a day for the tablets, right? Or I think it was $4 a day if you're going to do the medicinal dosing of it, $4 a day. I also asked the question of where else could that $4 a day go? And do you need to extend that if you're doing other things, more beneficial things when we think about diabetes and high blood pressure, et cetera, and obesity? We know that diet, exercise, and that will categorically improve markedly more than what you were able to do with just hydrogen water. And so I think that part's important too, that if you're taking hydrogen water to solve for diabetes in place of diet and exercise, where we know that will garner much more consistent and better results, that's a little bit where my nervousness comes in. It's kind of falling into this trap of a tablet or a machine, however you choose to do it, for an ill when there's better resources out there that can be offered. That tends to be one of my bigger hesitations, not to discount hydrogen water, but more to discount its place within a medical plan. Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, when it comes to the piecing together of the toolkit, it's like you have to select the things that are really specific to you and the things that are going to make the most sense. $4 a day could absolutely be spent on something a lot more specified to what you actually need. And like, let's say you're somebody who has just really low oxidative stress and you don't do a lot of working out and you have optimal SOD2 function and different things, but you have some other red flag, like, diabetes or whatever, and maybe some cinnamon and some apple cider vinegar would be a much better purchase for you. That's the whole thing that I'm trying to
Mm.
suggest here as well, is that
Yeah.
it's you need to find out if things are for you. And the biohacking industry has a real problem with these big blanket statements about cure this and optimize that. And I think hydrogen is certainly one of the higher offenders when it comes to that. Oh, cancer, and you're going to cure this and you're going to
Yeah.
fix that about your body. And there's no data to suggest that, right? So to me, it's more like an additive if it's appropriate for you and your genes and your lifestyle. Let's do all the other things right. And then we're going to pick what supplements make the most sense. It doesn't mean it's for each and every person, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Speaking of each and every person, and for our audience here, we have a poll that we
Oh my
haven't
gosh.
referenced yet.
God bless you and your SS. Audience, Dr. Martin is my favorite because she keeps me on task. Bon Dieu, merci, Madel. Okay, audience, here we go. Better late than never. In theory, we show up to the end of supporting you and offering what you seek when it comes to the best health information out there, especially genetically focused. And so we leverage the poll questions to help guide the conversation. We still have an hour. Thank you, Dr. Martin. All right. So the first question is, before today, have you ever heard of hydrogen water? And 88% of our audience had, with an 8% kind of sitting at vaguely, 4% saying no. Welcome to that 4%. I like that 4% is probably not on social media. What best describes your current opinion of hydrogen water? About 50% of the audience is sitting at I'm curious but unsure. 30% is saying they believed it. And oh, a happy 13% has said they've tried it and they've noticed improvements. Audience, for those that have tried it and noticed improvements, I think these are important stories to tell. Please toss into the chat that what you were trying to fix for and then what improvements you saw. Again, I want to be specific as to why you started and what benefit you saw from it, but please do share that. The next question we asked is what benefits do you associate with hydrogen water? And this was a pick-all. The biggest one was an increase of energy. So a lot of people associate that. The other big one was reduced inflammation. Again, so audience, I'd love to know, especially those that have experienced there, what do you mean by reduced inflammation? And about 20% of our audience was saying lighter wallet. So just holding up the balance there of where the audience is at. That tended to be one of actually the smallest. The next question that we asked was, would you consider regularly drinking hydrogen water if the benefits were backed by science? I'm in this group of yes, 78%. Absolutely. Absolutely. With 21% saying maybe it depends on the evidence and the cost. And I appreciate that. Yeah. The last question here, what describes your approach to biohacking? 60% of our audience is saying evidence-based and cautious. 26% is saying open-minded but skeptical. And then 14% is saying trend-driven and exploratory. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that so far as you're walking through that with someone that can guide you and give you a heads up when it might actually not be a good idea. Yeah, yeah. So, I'm just looking through the chat right now because I did ask the question of those that benefited. Um, mm, Someone said they used it for joint pain and they noticed that it helped. A few people said they've just started, and so they haven't really seen benefit yet. All right. So I
I see.
wonder
Actually,
before.
I want
Oh,
to mention one in the chat who said they were using it for lipid peroxidation targeting
mm,
hydroxyl radicals, and yes, saw benefits within 1 month of testing.
amazing. Neat.
Yes,
Okay. All right. I like
very
that with a very
specific
targeted,
with
very,
testing.
very
That's
specific. Yeah.
yes.
So thank you to the person that shared that. I very much appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Varden, for clocking the chat. I appreciate you. Um, okay. So before we transition into questions and answers, because I see quite a few questions and answers, um, Dr. Varden and Justin, I think a lot of this conversation has been balanced insofar as we acknowledge the hope, we acknowledge the want that this to be a really good thing, but with this very delicate space of science isn't there yet, so we don't really have a clear picture. Additional thoughts to that? Because I think this is such a typical thing when you're on that cusp, that bleeding edge of clinical medicine, of science, of biohacking. People are often in this position of, is this gold or is this fool's gold?
Right. You know, working off of that, I want to bring up and comment on a couple other comments here that just came in the chat, because I
Please.
think this blends beautifully into what you were just talking about. Because we have someone who said that, hang on, there's a couple of them, that they put the H2 tablets in 12 ounces of mineral water, quarter teaspoon of mineral salts, drink upon waking. They've noticed more energy and focus right off the bat. So, some people can have those immediate beneficial results.
Mm-hmm.
Another person said they just started yesterday and that they feel a weird headache after drinking it. And I want to
Mm.
address that. Another person said that they have either SOD is not so good, the SOD gene. They exercise a lot. Their CRP was 4 down to 0.4. They drink 32 ounces a day in split doses. So here we're
Mm.
seeing, some people, still using it,
Mm-hmm.
not feeling anything right away, others feeling things right away, but even with the headache. And this is where I want to get in with, what could be any problems, any contraindications, any
Mm,
safety concerns with this? And hydrogen water, it's generally considered very safe for human consumption. I mean, as far as the safety profile for animals, for humans, it's generally considered safe. Okay, generally considered safe, and and the thing is, as with any other supplement, there are considerations to keep in mind and possibly mild side effects to be aware of, that are not necessarily so much just the hydrogen, but also the way that you are taking it in or the product you are using. So
mm,
general, there can be some gastrointestinal upset, mild bloating, loose stools, diarrhea, particularly in high concentrations or when starting use.
mm,
Just as the body is adapting, to its use. To comment on the dizziness, the headache, small number of users have reported headaches, lightheadedness. Usually, it has been found to be transient. Again, this is, based on, yeah, anecdotal, research as far as side effects. But again, it's often associated with higher doses or rapid introduction.
yeah.
Again, because of any hydration status of the person, any
Mhm,
concurrent dietary changes, so there's a lot of aspects
mhm,
that could be affecting this. Um,
mm,
some people have reported sleepiness, slight fatigue after the hydrogen water intake, but that's rare, not real well documented. Again, this is
mm,
still quite an emerging field. But when we're talking about devices, it's important to understand the different ways that hydrogen water is created, because one of the ways is through electrolysis, these electrolysis devices. And, you know, this is doing the due diligence and the research, because poorly manufactured hydrogen water generators can lead to contamination with metals, any
mhm,
malfunctioning equipment. And obviously,
mm,
if you're introducing things like that into your body, it could be because of that, not necessarily the hydrogen water in itself. Um, if we're talking about the tablet based, okay,
mhm,
like magnesium or some others that you're actually putting a tablet in, it dissolves and you are introducing that extra hydrogen. Um, some, use metals, and that could cause some of that mild GI effects. Introducing trace minerals. Now, granted, several trace minerals are very good, but an overabundance of that can actually, cause some issues. So you definitely want to check for purity certifications. Very, very important.
yeah,
And then of course, if the person has any underlying conditions, definitely something to consider, especially with, chronic kidney disease, any electrolyte imbalances, definitely speaking or, clearing it with a healthcare provider. So these are
yeah,
concerns, these are things that need to be taken into account, when it comes to any possible side effects, sensitivities, anything like that.
yeah.
Yeah, well, also there's the thing to consider with the tablets is that we're also taking in magnesium. So I
Mm,
know some people who will do like 8 tablets in a glass, and they're doing it on a relative empty stomach, which is, you actually do want to do it on an empty stomach, but understand that magnesium can increase intestinal peristalsis, and that alone can be enough to
yeah.
send you to the bathroom if you're overdoing it. So
Yeah.
dose dependent and these kind of things, that's another kind of added thing to consider there. But as far as Dr. K's original question there about kind of how do we loop it all in, because we've all got varying kind of takes on it. And I think that the real theme is that science is a process, and not everything works
Yeah.
out. Some things take a lot of time to work out.
Yeah.
I'm sure there would have been a time when functional genomics would have been like, what is that? That's not
Yeah.
science, that's not hashed out, right? So that doesn't
People
mean it's
still
a
say
yay
that.
or nay. Yeah, I'm sure they do, right? So I think that it's one of those things where when burgeoning research starts, you want to keep your finger on the pulse of it. You want to keep an open mind, but some healthy skepticism as well. I don't think you need to
Mhm.
fall on one side or the other with this. I think it's a matter of like sometimes letting the chips fall. And that's one of the things people are the most uncomfortable with is letting the chips fall. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's the exact answer.
Yeah. 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 I think before we transition to questions, one of the things I hope the audience considers is that if you're turning to hydrogen water to cure a very specific or to address a very specific thing, I'd make sure that you're at least asking a healthcare provider, is there a different or more well vetted way to address this that will guarantee outcome? Because again, I go back again to that study where did people with pre-diabetes and obesity metabolic issues, did they see benefit? The answer was yes in that study of 60 people or 60 people. That said, we know they could have gotten better outcome had they done the diet and the exercise, etc. And so that's kind of where my head sits at, really integrating with a healthcare provider to say, is this the best path forward? Is it an adjacent and adjunctive thing to be doing with this? Or if there's nothing else to be done with this harm me, because maybe then it is a great thing. Like I'd really encourage audience, especially if they're trying to address something very specific, to make sure they ask the question of, if not this, then what else, to weigh out those pros and cons of all the options. Yeah. All right, audience, I think we're going to transition into questions and answers. And again, I'm going to remind you that we are not going to be making any specific product recommendations, nor are we going to be comparing product X to product Y. So if you've offered us a question along those lines, unfortunately, we will be skipping it. Okay. All right, so Marianne has our first question here, and she's asking, where in the body is hydrogen absorbed? Is it destroyed in the gut, or does it even reach the gut? So this is specific again to the drinks. I've seen in the chat a few questions around inhalation, and we can briefly speak to that later. But specific to the drinks, is this something that's demonstrated to be absorbed, and if so, where?
Well, Justin, did you want to comment and I can always jump in there?
Yeah. So I believe it becomes systemic from being absorbed into the duodenum, right? In the, what's it called? The jejunum. I can never pronounce that one correctly. But it does end up becoming actually systemic through there. The thing is though that it's not about the hydrogen, it's about the NRF2 pathway that it elicits. Right. And the NRF2 pathway actually goes into the nucleus of the cell and it changes DNA and it starts to turn on some of these different anti-inflammatory enzymes and things. So there's the hydrogen itself, but then there's kind of the ladder effect of the NRF2 pathway, and that's happening in the nucleus of the cell.
Yeah, and kind of bringing it back out, it's primarily absorbed, or the absorption does occur in the stomach. Yeah, to a lesser extent in the small intestines. Um, because the molecular hydrogen is tiny. It's that neutrally charged gas, allowing it to diffuse very rapidly across those cellular membranes, that you are saying and mentioning, Justin, which also allows it to be absorbed in the bloodstream through that mucosal lining of that stomach soon after ingestion. And, the hydrogen that does make it to the small intestines, that absorption continues, especially if the water passes quickly through the stomach. Um, Hydrogen is not destroyed by stomach acid or digestive enzymes. Unlike a lot of other nutrients, molecular hydrogen does not react with acidic or alkaline conditions, and therefore it remains chemically intact as hydrogen gas as it passes through that, the upper GI tract. So um, that I think, then works into the cells and works on those, the nerve pathways, etc. But actually just in more of the gross aspect
Mm-hmm.
of where it gets absorbed.
Yeah. Does food have an impact on that? So if you eat a meal and then drink your water, is that different or the same as if you were to do it on an empty stomach?
Yeah, you're supposed to do it separate from any food, especially carbohydrates and high amounts of
Mm.
fiber. They're just it's the combining of those two things, right? Because carbohydrates, especially fibrous ones, will increase its own hydrogen content. You're supposed to do it separate from that and do it more or less on an empty stomach.
Mm-hmm. All right. Kevin has our next question. So they have a hydrogen machine that offers both breath and drink. Um, they're asking, and so Kevin, I guess Kevin had two questions. The first one was, does the container where they're making or infusing the water, does it matter if it's plastic, steel, glass? And then separate to that, Kevin, the second question where you're asking about how long to infuse, that's a product specific question. So I'd encourage you consult your manual. But between Justin and Laura, do you think there's a difference infusing in a plastic, steel, or glass? What would your preference be?
Glass, but not
Okay.
anything to do with the hydrogen, just because it's going to be the least toxic container that out of the three listed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I would go with glass because most plastics are not hydrogen tight. The hydrogen can actually diffuse out, especially, after a period of time. So glass is much better at retaining
Mhm.
hydrogen compared to that. Um, Stainless steel, aluminum, depends on air tightness seals. But it's still something about the structure of it, and the permeability of hydrogen. So yeah, I'd go with Justin, same glass.
Yeah. All right. Susan has our next question. Are there gene variants associated with increased need and or potential benefit for consuming hydrogen water? Yeah.
Yes,
Justin. Yeah.
the one that I mentioned there, and I didn't mention the whole pathway because there's actually a couple parts to it. But the most direct pathway that we have that we look at in the DNA 360 is the superoxide dismutase pathway. There's actually two genes to that, right? There's SOD2, and then there's another one called GPX, glutathione peroxidase. It's a 1-2 punch for how the body gets rid of free radicals in the mitochondria. So if that's suboptimal, or even if there's an imbalance like between the speeds of those two enzymes, then that would be suggestive of somebody who needs a little bit of help when it comes to clearing free radicals. And hydrogen may be one of those ingredients you reach towards. Definitely sauna, right? Definitely these other things that encourage cellular detoxification. But that's the pathway that I would point you towards.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're looking for the SOD2 pathway that Justin just mentioned, you'd go into your DNA 360 and then in the anti-inflammatory section, um, you will see a report that's very specific to mitochondrial wellness. Dr. Varden, you're always better with names. What's the name of that report? Is it
Oh,
mitochondrial?
for the SOD2 GPX,
Is it
that's in
mitochondria?
anti-inflammatory. Yeah, it's called the
Yeah.
antioxidation
Thank
pathway.
you.
There you go. But yes, it's in the
Perfect. Yeah.
anti-inflammatory reports.
Got it. Yeah. And thank you, Justin. That was a great answer. All right. Um, there is a question, and I'm gonna remove the product naming here. Um, but Sandra's asking the question of, is there a preference or a difference between machines and tablets, especially when you have to consider someone who has a travel laden schedule? I would imagine traveling for work, or they're not always necessarily going to be tethered to a machine. So outside of the convenience, is the end product of a machine compared to a tablet going to be markedly different?
I think that the benefit of the tablet is that it's more reliable as far as the actual parts per million of hydrogen that's really saturating the water, right? So you can get the water bottles, you can get the machines, and they are going to generate a certain part per million. But the problem is they have these gaskets in there that start to weaken over time. And typically, after like a few weeks, the ppm is going to start to drop. And then you don't really know what you're getting. Is it still working? Is it not still working? one of the little tidbits of wisdom that I heard from a gentleman named Dr. Tyler LeBaron, who he's a big advocate of hydrogen, is he
Mm-hmm.
talks about the pop. He says that if you have one of the bottles or the machines and it still pops, that means that it's still making a lot of that pressure and you're likely still okay there. But if the pop is starting to go away, remember this is a gas and a sealed unit. There should be a little release there going on. The machine should fart, so to speak. If it no longer does that, then that means that there's definitely a little bit less. But the thing about the tablets is it's a one and done thing, right? So you use the tablet, you drink it, and then that's done. It's a fresh tablet every time. So it's a bit more predictable as to the parts per million that you're actually going to get tablet by tablet, whereas the machines can start to dissipate over time. So that would be my main suggestion there is like they'll still work, but it's just not going to be reliable for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Our next question is coming in from Mickey. So Mickey is saying, and I think we've indirectly addressed this a little bit before we transition to Q&A, but I'll still offer it again. Is it true that hydrogen is not a direct antioxidant, but has more of an adaptogenic characteristic? Their understanding is that it addresses hydrogen radicals. And then she or they reiterate their benefit. It sounds like improvement with their lipid peroxidase, so close. And they also mention that they have poor SOD2 and are extremely active. And so with a history of cancer, so kind of like a bit of a fraught history, um, but just in regards to mechanism of action there. I think we talked about that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, and honestly, I would say that this person's understanding is quite good and definitely supported with the current science because when we're talking about molecular hydrogen, yeah, it acts only very weakly as a direct antioxidant. Its scavenging of hydroxyl radicals is possible, but it happens at such a slow rate that it's not likely to be the main mechanism in living systems for that. Really, what just like what Justin was talking about at the beginning of this webinar, it really acts and functions more as that redox, okay, that adaptogen or hormetic agent, supporting the overall redox balance and stimulating the body's own defense systems. And, he mentioned, that this is very evident in those protective pathways, the keep one and the nerf two, increasing the body's own antioxidants, the
Mm-hmm.
superoxide dismutase, glutathione peroxidase, catalase, things like that, mopping up those free radicals. So yeah, absolutely. They were right on in the assessment of that. So very
Mm-hmm.
smart. Good.
Yeah. Mickey's also asking the question, and I alluded we get back to this, is breathing gas more effective? I thought studies for cancer were from breathing gas. Um, I have a bit of a bias, and I'll disclaim it here. I think if one is to leverage hydrogen for medicine, I see a bit more robust findings, especially in the spaces of chronic illness specific to COVID, in benefits of delivery. And I guess one thing I would offer is I don't know if that's because the machinery in order to offer this inhaled is a little bit less commercial and therefore a little bit more controlled within laboratories. Therefore, it's more consistent compared to at-home machinery or tablets where you're going to get a lot more variation. I'm not sure how much of a compounding factor, but I see it's with the inhaled, the studies are still small and it's still on that beginning. It's showing to be promise, but the results there tend to be a bit more consistent in finding benefit for those that sit within sick populations. And I believe that though both drank and inhaled hydrogen is studied in cancer populations, but it's always coupled to treatment. It tends to be an adjunctive treatment, not a lone treatment. Yeah. Right. Great. All right. The next question we have is from Jessica. Jessica's asking about what about hydration? Does hydrogen water, is that better for hydration compared to regular old water? Are you more hydrated if you had a liter of hydrogen water and a liter of water? Which one's going to hydrate you more? Is there any opinion on that?
My opinion on that is that if you use the tablets and you're actually getting a little dose of magnesium at the same time, the magnesium would in fact improve hydration status, but it's because of the magnesium, not so much the hydrogen. Uh, and I think that when it comes to the water bottles and things that aren't using the elemental magnesium, it's likely about the same. Like I mentioned, it doesn't change anything about the structure of the water, the alkalinity. It does nothing to change that. It's just a delivery system for
Hmm.
the actual hydrogen, but because of the ionized magnesium element, if you do it that way, I'm sure it's hydrating you just a little bit better.
Yeah, and
Beautiful.
honestly, there's no solid scientific evidence really that hydrogen gas itself enhances the actual water absorption or hydration process compared to regular water. It's really important. Just make sure you drink your water. Very important. Does cross all your cellular membranes, gut, tissues exactly the same way. So regardless, make sure that
Yeah.
that you're hydrating with good old H2O.
Yeah. I always think that's such an interesting variable and why we need that placebo group, because I can appreciate for some people drinking 1.5 liters of water a day might be more than usual in a lot of these groups. And I was always so curious, is it simply just based on hydration that people are noticing better benefit? Yeah. All right. Our next question is going to be from, oh, I hope I'm saying this correctly, Inna. Inna said they may typically what is recommended when it comes to consuming hydrogen water, how often, how frequent. Um, and I would speculate there's going to be different answers based on the end there, the end goal, right?
Yeah, and so the question suggests like she's kind of asking. She has a slightly suboptimal SOD2 pathway, and she's talking a little bit about the intermediate chemical that happens between phase one and phase two that we kind of look at. So if you do have an imbalance in the SOD2 pathway, it basically means that you're going to have a buildup potentially of the intermediate chemical, which is quite toxic to the body, right? Hydrogen peroxide. Um, I'm just trying to understand what the question is actually asking
Oh,
here.
sorry, I jumped
If you
ahead.
jump
I
down to
jumped
the
ahead
next
one
one.
question.
Okay, yeah, I was reading one
Yeah.
and then because yeah, the next one was Susan's.
No, no, no.
Um,
I wanted to distill Susan's a little bit before offering it to you guys.
okay.
So Ina's question is simply, she qualified it below actually, and she's using an inhalation device. And so, what I would recommend is working with a provider who's familiar with that device because it would depend on what you're trying to solve for and what you're trying to address. So, I would offer that kind of steps into the space of prescription because cancer compared to chronic illness compared to an athlete, all of those are going to have different prescriptions. So I'd really encourage you working with a provider. If you want to touch base with us, feel free to email us at ceo@thednacompany.com and we can connect you with some support there. Yeah. Let's see here. So, Justin, I'm going to jump back up to Susan's question. So, Susan is saying, she's talking about her SOD2 pathway. She says the one is suboptimal. Um, and when she looks at her GPX, um, the GPX is fast. So, there's a little bit of an imbalance there. And she's asking if, based on that profile, would that, give further reason towards consuming hydrogen water?
In my opinion, that would be one of those genetic indicators. Yeah, that would suggest that added, just added, use of that particular pathway is in your interest. Like, I don't think that it necessarily means hydrogen, but know that that is basically going to represent an increased buildup of free radicals. And that is exactly the pathway that we're talking about with hydrogen. So, like I was mentioning earlier in the call, that's why I use it. It's because I have suboptimal SOD2 pathway and because I live an athletic lifestyle. And this is one of those things that is like a genetic mismatch that I know I'm doing, but I'm not going to
Hmm.
stop doing it. So, what am I going to do? I'm going to go ahead and add an intervention and something that might support my biology on that pathway. And so, you would be in a similar boat there because your genes aren't serving you particularly well on that pathway. So, a little bit of hydrogen may or may not be of use for you on that pathway.
Hmm. Yeah. Nicole has asked the question of how do you make hydrogen water? And I feel like, or Nicole, I think if you just watch the replay of this, I think this question may have come in a little bit late, but we did talk through the machine of it. We did talk through the tablets of it. So typically, those tend to be the options. You can get a machine that infuses. You can get tablets, or sometimes there's small water bottles as well. Mark is asking the next question of, is there research on the best way to consume hydrogen water, tablet machine, water inhalation? And I would offer, Mark, right now, a lot of that research will really sit, what are you trying to address? Because that will, especially for long-term illness, it tends to be more the inhaled form, compared to kind of more out of hospital illness, for lack of better phrasing, out of hospital, then it tends to be the water forms that are most studied. Yeah. Dr. Varden, Justin, any other thoughts there?
Well, I mean, I would say that the research is ongoing,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it comes to comparing these various methods, because generally, in the studies, some of the studies that we cited, and in several studies on that site that I had mentioned about hydrogenstudies.com, they were looking to see hydrogen water for a particular help, symptom, benefits, whatever. So they just used one. They didn't compare, going, hey, how's this for the tablets? How's this for, a machine? It was just getting hydrogen water in whatever form. And then they mentioned what the form was in their methods and materials section. But because this is a burgeoning area of biohacking, and more companies are coming in, creating machines, tablets, forms, etc. There really hasn't been much done, to
Mm-hmm.
actually going, here's a study, let's compare all of this. And then where
Yeah.
do you go from there? So
Yeah. A three-arm study would be quite ambitious and cool, but
yeah.
ambitious.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. All right. Mike has our next question. Mike, you're digging in deep to some science here. So Mike is asking, and I'm going to paraphrase your question a little bit, Mike, but when studying clinical outcomes, biomarkers of, especially from kind of a more chemical perspective of redox reactions, what markers are you tracking to see benefit? And Yeah, and so really, like, what clinical markers are leveraged to study this to discern is there actual benefit? Do you guys want to speak to any of the general kind of anti-inflammatory redox sort of functional markers outside of disease-specific markers?
Well, actually, like one person in the chat initially, they had said, hey, I took this for lipid peroxidation and did the test to measure that. So the marker of lipid peroxidation, which is cell membrane damage, is MDA, uh, malonodialdehyde. There we go. And there are multiple studies that report significant reduction in MDA after hydrogen water use. Now, again, I would need to, look into those specific, but actually, there are some of those studies that were mentioned in that one study that I had talked about earlier in the review, Hydrogen Water Extra Healthy or a Hoax, that systemic review. One of those studies was mentioned in there.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, you had mentioned the 8-OHDG. So this is the 8-hydroxy 2 deoxyguanosine. There we go. That's a measure for oxidative DNA damage. So again, another one, superoxide dismutase activity, which obviously is associated with our SOD2. There's also a SOD1, SOD3, but again, it works into mitochondrial functioning. And so, yes, there's specific studies that have looked at that. There are some other markers, T-bars, which also does some readout for the lipid peroxidation. And I know that there's some others. So definitely inflammatory cytokines, when you're
Mhm.
talking about IL-6, TNF alpha, total antioxidant capacity. So, you know, uh, those are often biomarkers that can be that and have been measured in scientific studies when it comes to looking at the effects of hydrogen water.
Mm. Yeah.
Justin, did you have any other uh, comments, redox biomarkers, any other thing?
Yeah, yeah. So my favorite one is actually the 8-hydroxydeoxyguanosine because it's a little bit more of a cumulative marker of oxidative stress as far as the DNA damage aspect is concerned. I mean, I think that lipid peroxides are certainly a pretty good direct measurement, but like the way that 8-OHDG works is like
Mhm.
ongoing oxidative stress and how that's really impacting your body. So I mean, earlier when I referenced my biomarkers, that's what
Mhm.
I was talking about was 8-OHDG. That I trained too much, suboptimal SOD2.
Mhm.
8-OHDG was not only like on the lower end, like a little bit below the threshold, actually. Like I didn't expect it to be as low as it was. But I wasn't that surprised either because of the increased just ability to recover in things that I experience now at 33 as opposed to how I used to. But yeah, I mean, 8-OHDG is a fantastic marker, and I think it's a good one to get checked couple times a year or something like that, especially if you don't have the greatest genes associated with that pathway.
Yeah, and when you're talking about clinical validation, you want to look at studies that have these types of biomarkers where they are
Mhm.
showing, larger deltas, or if not, why not? Look at the results. Don't just cherry pick going, oh, I just want to find something that shows benefits. No, if there are certain markers that are unchanged, well, pay attention to that. Why are they
Mhm.
unchanged? Is it you want to see more consistency or robustness across these different studies? And that's the whole point, is that, again, this burgeoning field of research, that's what we want to do, is increase the robustness of the information, whether it shows
Mhm.
benefits, negative results, or nothing at all. So, but you want to look at the markers, not these general vague claims going boosts hydration, repairs DNA, or just gives you these overall blanket statements. No, you want to really dig down and look specifically.
Mhm. Yeah. All right. Leah is asking a question of, is there research that looks at ABOP, LDL, and kind of other lipid markers within the body? I believe, and please confirm my understanding here, there are some small studies, small sitting in the window of like 40 people for a week or two, or a month, sorry, 4 weeks. And there was an appreciable decrease, slight decrease in these numbers. But they were very small end studies and they weren't for very long. So just kind of keep that in mind, and that there suggests a modest promise, but really more robust studies need to be done there. Justin, Dr. Varden, anything to add atop that?
No, but I do think that if the research ends up hashing out that there is some at least relatively potent anti-inflammatory effects from using hydrogen, I would suspect it's possible that the trickle down effect of that could be a better profile when it comes to some of these lipids, LDL. We
Mm-hmm.
know that toxicity and inflammation are pretty big movers in how that whole kind of system works. So I don't think that it's out of the question that it could be a decent tool to use moving forward, especially if you have some genetic weak points there when it comes to inflammation, detoxification, PCSK9, right? Like some of these LDL receptors could be suboptimal. I think it could be a tool in the toolkit, but at this stage, I wouldn't recommend it as the first line of defense by any means.
Yeah. Yeah. Very sound there. Yeah. All right. Dan has our next question. Wondering if we're familiar with SIBO and IMO. IMO, where um, methanogens use hydrogen produced by the SIBO bacteria to make methane, and this leads to IBS constipation. Um, and so, if you have SIBO and IMO, would hydrogen supplement be hydrogen water be the same form of hydrogen that would be feeding this and effectively complicate the picture. In short, do you find that this is something that you should try or not? Um, I'm not familiar with any research that looks at this. Have either of you heard clinical anecdotes? Because I think at this point in time it would be more word of mouth as opposed to like a full-fledged study.
No, I haven't heard of any studies. Mine would just be a matter of theory.
Hmm.
With the
Yeah.
fact that, when you're drinking hydrogen water, yeah, it delivers, molecular hydrogen to the gut, but the total amount is a lot less than what's produced by the bacteria fermentation in SIBO or IMO.
Mm.
So, I mean, yeah,
Yeah, Dan, this would be somewhere
I,
I'd want you to work with a provider because I would
yeah,
offer at this point there's probably more pointed things you can be doing to support SIBO and IMO, as opposed to hydrogen water. And it's not to discount your exploration there because I can
yeah,
appreciate when you're navigating those. It's a very lonely and exhausting process. Just something to be mindful of.
right.
Yeah. Well, sorry, Dr. Laura. I was going to say too, like, I consider SIBO to be like basically a form of dysbiosis, like it's almost like an accelerated version of that. And hydrogen would not be among my list of like first things I would look at with that. I mean, I think
Yeah.
doing a really comprehensive gut panel, like we have the gut 360, which gives you a lot of great information, doing a mucosal barrier assessment,
Yeah.
doing, just all
Mhm.
the different GI pathogen screening and food sensitivity screening.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of work you can do on the gut. Hydrogen being in that equation, that would be a pretty later
I-
part to look at. Like there's so many probiotics
Yeah.
and enzymes and HCl and just
Yeah.
gut supplements alone, you could take out a second mortgage. So it wouldn't be on my top list.
You don't want to poke the bear, even if it's a light poke.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Tom has a question here, and I think it was also echoed as well in the chat. Can you simply add a splash of 3% hydrogen peroxide to a pitcher of distilled water?
I don't
I
think that's a good idea. I mean, I
Mhm.
have, I have no experience with that, but
Please
hydrogen
don't.
peroxide is rather toxic
Please
to the
don't.
body. Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend that. Um, Ladies, any other thoughts on that? I've never heard of it.
It's okay. First of all, H2O2, hydrogen peroxide, not the same as molecular hydrogen gas. Um, so it's not something that I would recommend to suggest. And the fact that ingesting hydrogen peroxide, especially, at, concentrations, it can cause irritation, burns, ulcers, just not a good idea.
Please no. Yeah. All right. As
But it's
Nicole
a
is
good
at,
question. I'm glad it was asked.
yeah, no, it is a
Yeah.
great question because I think there's a lot of things that can be done there. I just want the answer to be a firm no.
Yeah, biohackers think like that too, though. Like that's part of our exploration of this whole thing. But hydrogen is not hydrogen, right? There's a lot of different
Yeah.
forms, and that's certainly
Yeah.
not one to be ingested.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I've done a lot of crazy things, and I don't mean that to be crazy. I don't think it would be that harmful, but please no. Yeah. Nicole's asking the question, well, how would you divide the 1.5 liters over the day? So Nicole's referencing to a lot of the studies that we've mentioned. They roughly will recommend between 1 to 1.5 liters divided throughout the day. I think most of them sit at 500 mils 3 times a day. A few of them are 250 mils 4 times a day. So there's an element of what you're able to do, afford, and what works within your lifestyle. Yeah, or to Justin's point, right? He uses it very specific to and in relation to a workout. So remember the end goal. Remember the end goal because that may change the when and the how much. The next question here is how many minutes after drinking hydrogen water do you need to wait before eating?
I believe the actual, I mean, again, there's none of these that are like really ironed out statistics, but according to what's the gentleman's name? Alex Tarnava, he's like a hydrogen expert. I believe he says an hour is a pretty good kind of gauge point, especially if it's a carbohydrate heavy meal, like I mentioned
Mm,
earlier. Give it about an hour, and that's probably your best bet. You want things to be kind of cleared and digested, and not have all these things going in at the same time. But I don't believe that that's an exact science. I would say an hour is a pretty good little general marker to work from.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say, if you're cut for time or you're like, yeah, I need to, shorten it some, um, I would try to make it no less than, say, 30 minutes. I still think that you
mm,
could um, get some benefits, because really what ends up happening is the food could slow down the absorption. Really, that's what you're trying to avoid. So if you're cut for time and you're like, yeah, I can't wait an hour, you'll still get some benefits. But yeah, just empty stomach, give it some time, and have your breakfast.
mm. All right. Um, Dan's asking a similar question as well. Can you take non-food supplements, so this could be herbs, probiotics, enzymes, minerals, etc., with hydrogen water? Um, and I think, and Justin, Dr. Varden, please confirm here. It's probably in the same category as food. You want to hold off until afterwards.
I think with the exception of probably electrolytes, I don't think that
Okay.
adding other minerals would be to the detriment there. I definitely wouldn't recommend the probiotics and things at the same time as that. But I think like minerals may be pretty good complement. I mean, we've already talked about magnesium being added, so I don't know why other elements would be harmful there. But generally, I don't take it alongside a heck of a lot of other supplements. I try to make it a little more sovereign.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. Jennifer has our last question, and they recently purchased a machine, an inhalation machine, that can also make water. They're wondering if they inhale a few times a week. There's wondering if there's benefit to drinking hydrogenated water as well. And so I think, depending on what you're seeking to do, and assuming that the machine is able to offer that, I'm going to borrow Justin's phrase, the fart when you open it. Um, the real question, I think, Jennifer, that you might want to work with your practitioner and your provider is, what are you trying to solve for? Because the what will definitely change how much, how often, and the form too. So, unfortunately, we don't really have a more specific answer, but I'd really encourage you to work with a provider. And if you don't have one, please feel free to reach out to us, because I think a large arc of what we've been talking about is that, is there promise, is there benefit to this? Probably is the answer. But you want to make sure that you're doing that in step with a provider, so you know what you're addressing, and that it's part of a plan that's actually addressing it and not just sidestepping what you're trying to address. Because I think Justin has a huge belief in this and expects the promise we see to come to fruition. I like that. Whereas I stand back a little bit more hesitant. I like that we're able to get into one room with Dr. Varden strongly in the middle. I like that we're able to get into a room and have this conversation, because I think it's important to people to hear the state of developing medicine. Because, Justin, to your point, biohacking is this new space that everyone gets to play around in and try different things and have fun. And we want to know kind of the true state of the research. And there's never really going to be one sound opinion on it. It's going to be a collection that you need to weed through. Right? Yeah. So guys, thank you for being on this journey with me, and thank you. In a world that tends to be so extreme and polarized, I'm really grateful we got into a room and we brought different polarities together.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
trying to navigate subjects and topics. And when we do one of these deep dives on like an ingredient, it can be a little bit difficult because we don't want to go and push further than what the research
Mm-hmm.
suggests. However, we also want to come at it from that open-minded perspective and say, this represents a potential tool that we may be able to use. A
Mm-hmm.
year from now, we might do a second part to this webinar and have a more concrete answer where all three
Mm-hmm.
of us like, it's bullshit, or all three of us are like, you know what, it's the best molecule of all time. You never know, right? So we have to just kind of navigate and do our best and try to look at the research, use anecdotal evidence as well as real hardcore evidence, and try to arrive at the most useful place as practitioners. I recommend so many different spectrums of things, from essential oils to infrared saunas, everything in between. I'm always trying to piece together the toolkit that makes the most sense. So it's not in my benefit as a practitioner to right away say that's bullcrap, or right away say that's
Mhm.
definitely it. We always have to have our mind with that functional hat on. And I think that that's what we're trying to kind of get to the bottom of with topics like this.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that the conservatism that we take uh, is very prudent in the fact that we want to make sure that what we say, that what we talk about is scientifically based. Having that cutting edge, but not pushing it to a point of being irresponsible into
Mhm.
doing something where we have to backtrack because, oh, this is really problematic. So I mean, that's at least the stance that I take, that I want to see some of that evidence. I will keep my eye and my finger on the pulse, of what's the newest thing, what's going on. But then I want to see some evidence. I want to dive a little bit deeper because, also when you consider hydrogen gas, just remember the Hindenburg. So you don't want any any sparks around if you have that. So, but it absolutely is essential for life. And as Justin so beautifully put it in the beginning, it's everywhere. It's part of the stars, part of the universe, part of us. And it
Mhm.
is an absolutely essential molecule and the first element on the periodic table of elements.
Mhm. Yeah. So, audience, thank you for being on this journey with us. Dr. Varden, Justin, thank you so very much for being on this journey with me. I value your balancing so much. And I think it is time we dance out. So, audience, if you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We do take it to heart. We value it. We show up for you. So, if you have any feedback, things you want to hear, things you don't want to hear, let us know. And I think we dance out because dancing is the best thing you can do for your mental health. Au revoir, merci mes amis. Au revoir.
Thanks,
Where's the
everybody. Have a
music?
good night.
Yeah.